Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Earth Initiation Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of topics that I've had on my mind for a while. I've just been waiting for the right moment to speak about it all, and it has all come together in the last week in such a serendipitous way that it's like, oh, okay, the understanding that has dropped in, and I'm ready to speak about it. So today we're going to be talking about viruses, self-worth, mind control, entities, psychic attacks, and ultimately wholeness as kind of the antidote to all of that. If you've been listening to any of my episodes, you know that that has been a message that's been coming through from my soul for a very long time with these episodes about wholeness, about I don't know how much I've actually shared about my thoughts about protection, but I think I've really started to talk about that this year, and especially with the current climate, with world events going on, lots of fears, lots of new threats, fears of what could happen in the future popping up. There's a lot of people that are in protective mode, which is survival mode. My soul has been very clear about that for some time now. So we're going to talk about like, well, what do you do to energetically protect yourself, and how do you show up as a whole person, which is kind of the state that I want to say makes you immune to the chaos of the world. That doesn't mean it's not going to like maybe influence your life in terms of like certain choices that you can make, or that there might not be emotions that come with it, but in terms of like really impacting you in a detrimental way, just because everybody else is in chaos. And even if there are like massively scary things that happen in the world in the future, your individual experience of that is something that you have control over. So we don't necessarily have control over what the collective is experiencing, or what the collective yeah, what the collective is creating, right? Because that's a collective creation. We don't really have control over what other people are deciding, what they're thinking about, what their emotional state is, how fragmented they are, how much they are being influenced by mind control and viruses and all this stuff. And these are topics that I've actually never really gone into. But today is the day my soul's like, we're going there, we're going there. So as always, before I get started, I want to hand power back to you. These messages are channeled directly from my soul's wisdom. They are a like one perspective. I've done a lot of inner work, a lot of shadow work to be able to have clear communication with my soul, to be able to tap into wisdom clearly, aside from my personal egoic viewpoints, my wounded viewpoints, my traumas, my pains, my unresolved shit, like all that stuff, and which is what I believe it takes to really be able to tap into like the truth of what's happening now, the truth of what will actually help us move through this era and come out on the other side stronger than ever, thriving, and actually be able to thrive during this era when everybody else says that the world is collapsing and all the structures are collapsing and there's all these resets happening and blah, 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 blah. If that's where you've been, I know, especially in some spiritual crowds, a lot of people can get stuck in that, like, all the systems have to restructure themselves, and all the old world is falling away and it's collapsing and it's crumbling, and it may or may not be destructive. And whether you experience that destructive and the severity of it is something my soul wants you to know is something that you have influence around, significant influence. And I want to also say, first, let's finish my last thought. Like, the power's in your hands, though. This is my perspective. This is what's true coming from my soul to the best of my ability right now. Take it or leave it, you know? And just because it does, if it sparks emotion in you, that doesn't necessarily mean it isn't resonating with you. In fact, if it sparks emotion with you, Even if it is fear, that's some sort of resonant frequency there. We are always resonating with something, and you also have power to change what it is you are resonating with. And when you're like, is this part of my truth? You're asking a question of discernment, which is why shadow work, going to the inner world and getting into those really icky, sticky spots in our consciousness, in our bodies that we've been afraid to go into, the emotions that have been too intense, the stories that we are afraid of that might be true about ourselves, like whether we're worthy or not, or whether we're lovable or not, or whether we're good enough or not, like those really core stories, whether we belong in this world or not. Those are the areas that you have to go into to actually be able to have discernment of like, is this my truth or not? So I've been saying that on every single episode, and I think that's just gonna be a theme going forward. But anyways, I let's take a deep breath because I think I just like laid a lot on everybody. Oh, and what I wanted to say, let's pause. I can get really excited about this topic, and I have so much to add to it, but I really want to just slow the pacing a little bit, slow down, ease into the message here. And you might already feel emotions stirring. And what I wanted to say is that if I'm using the word control, just know that I actually am never an advocate for control. Control is another indicator that you're in a survival-based paradigm. And the people that are going to be able to thrive through this era of everything changing and being restructured for our benefit, that's what's happening. It's not going to look like that to a lot of people, maybe for the next 5 to 8 years. We will start to see some of these chaos cycles end and complete themselves, but how they touch your individual life is something you can help to create. So that's also a big message my soul has been saying since probably 2 or 3 years ago. Is like we need to move out of this idea of controlling, protecting, survival into the era of creation and thriving and freedom and sovereignty and collaboration with one another. So they're two very distinct mindsets, right? So if I say control, it's just for relatability purposes, but you actually in order to have control, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes on video, you need to be in your energy of creation and own your creative power and own that you have the ability to influence your personal experience of life. We are in a collective consensus world, right? Again, like we are not the only people we're not the only person that contributes to the collective reality, and yet you are not a victim to that. You get to choose your at least frequency bandwidth of experiences when it comes to how you experience the collective energy. And that definitely comes down to your ability to move out of the survival paradigm, which does not mean, which I think whereas most people, and I've been repeating this message a lot, and I think I'm going to keep saying it till I'm blue in the face, you cannot reject that part of yourself. You cannot move out of the survival paradigm, the control paradigm, the protective paradigm by saying, fuck that. I'm going to be in the creational paradigm now, and I reject anything that has to do with survival based energy. No, you have survival based parts of your brain. They are one of the very first things to evolve, and we have to take that along with us. And so it's about making peace and be able to love all of those parts, which is wholeness, which has been my message also. And you'll see why this is part of the message today about wholeness. It's like we don't reject anything about ourselves, even if I don't care how gnarly it is, how embarrassing it is, how shameful it is, how much regret you hold around it. You have to own all of your actions in this life. You have to own all of the ways that you've shown up in this life. You have to own all of your emotions. It doesn't matter how scary they are. And only from that space can you move into the creational paradigm? Because when you are, there are a lot of people that, and I think this is where you might hear if you're in spiritual circles, the idea of false light. That's a big thing, right? Oh, this person's false light, this person's teaching false light. And for people that may not be familiar with the term false light, it's like a person that is either appearing or is directly communicating verbally or through their content of their posting online or whatever, the things that they say they are, right? They say they are for love, they say they are for light, they say they are for unity and collaboration and creation and all this stuff, but actually underneath the surface they either have a conscious ulterior agenda to profit, or not that profiting is a bad thing, but like the motives and the motivations behind that, the intentions behind that are not aligned with love. They're not aligned with unity. They are aligned with survival paradigm. So that's what that really is. So there's a lot of judgment that goes around about false light. And actually, I think all of us, unless you've done the real work to claim all parts of yourself, claim all emotions that belong to you, claim all these things and own all of it fully and completely, and you're in a state of wholeness and you know exactly who you are, what is yours and what is somebody else's, and what your true intentions are, and all of this stuff. Unless you've done that work, we actually probably, if you are in this, we'll call it polarization of you've decided that you are a good person, you decided you want to help people, you want to be of service, you want to do good in the world, and yet you have this underbelly hidden world of all the fragmented parts of you that you've rejected or you've been in denial of or you've just been resistant to go into because they're hard or they don't make you feel good or whatever, right? That shit sucks. I'm going to tell you, it's really hard. Like some of the stuff I've had to confront about my own self, and like, yeah, the ways that you've been evil, the ways you've been, like, we all have done that. And if you don't think you have, then that's false light. And so there's nothing wrong or bad about that. And actually, so this is tying back into my episode that I had posted maybe 2 months ago, which was like judgment and love cannot exist at the same time. That's that concept coming up again, because as soon as you're judging your survival self, because that's why you're doing it, right? The fragmentation, the rejection, the denial, the complete burial of parts of us that we don't like or we think society will punish us for or God will punish us for. There's so many reasons, or will get us killed, right? Or maybe that you saw that in a different life or your ancestors did and you had that genetically passed down to you, that's like, oh, if I use my voice then I could really be punished, right? That's a classic wound. In some way I can be killed, I could be tortured, or I saw that happen to people, and so I'm gonna really suppress my voice, right? I'm really going to, and so that's a fragmentation that occurs. And so then when you're saying, oh, okay, I'm here for the light, I'm here for love, but you're not communicating authentically, that would be a false light scenario. So I'm just trying to take the judgment out of this. And because I think a lot of people also throw that phrase out as a superiority thing or to drag people down. And that's just more of that survival based drama triangle energy. I also have a episode I've been talking about a lot this week in particular about the drama triangle, which is anytime you are in a victim, villain, or savior mode, that is also the same kind of survival based paradigm that we need to mature out of. So this is like a graduation, if you will. It doesn't look like it, but we're preparing for our final exam. We're in the middle of it. We just started it with all this chaos that's going down. And what are you going to choose? And how, what kind of energy are you going to choose it out of actually matters more. So sometimes I am choosing my survival self. And when I do, I'm doing it out of love. I'm like, dude, my survival self is really freaking out over here about this particular thing. And so I am going to honor that. And I'm going to choose love and how I engage with that. And I'm going to actually do what it's asking me to do. So it's not necessarily ignoring the survival instinct. It's about being the conscious creator that can be present in all of it, which you can only be truly, truly present, which was my last episode about being present. And it's beyond the buzzword that goes online. It's a very sophisticated technology that allows you to be in that seat of creation. And being present means you're in that loving, neutral witness observer of all parts of you, and you're kind of making the CEO decision for your life of what kind of energy are you going to be infusing into your actions going forward? What voices are you going to listen? What part of you are you going to listen to? And how are you going to utilize that energy? So it's not about like survival energy is bad or wrong. So that again, we got to exit out of the judgmental paradigm. Judgment and love cannot exist. So if you're judging false light or you're judging someone else that has false light, um, going back to another concept that I talk about a lot, which is the holographic principles, your reality is a mirror for your inner world. Not to say everything that you see is a mirror of something that's going on with you, but any emotion that is spiking in your reality, that is a mirror for you, 100%. 100%. So the emotions are mirrors. Nobody actually has the ability to make you feel any certain way. That would be victimhood paradigm. So, okay, let's take a breath because I could talk more about this. This has been my soul's assignment over the last year was to really deconstruct these ideas and anchor them in my own life. And I haven't really understood why is it so important. It doesn't sound really sexy to do, but I'm starting to get it now, and I'm like, oh, it's preparing me to be able to thrive in a time where a lot of people are not. They're just not going to be in that energy. They're really going to struggle. They're really going to be suffering. They're really going to be confronted by all of their wounds that they refuse to look at. So it's like we're in that era that it's just like you can't escape that stuff anymore. And I've talked at length about that in my other episodes this year as well. So specifically the energy reading that I did in January, but other ones too. So let's just take a breather before we get into even further layer here. That little intro, which really feels like just a giant recap of everything that I have been speaking about for quite some time now. Okay. So this is really a spiritual is more this episode's more for people that are really heavy into the spiritual world. If you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not really that spiritual, but I'm here listening anyways, trust that your soul is guiding you to this for one reason or another. Maybe it's preparing you for something that's gonna happen down the line, or I don't know. Trust the fact that you're here listening to this, and use your discernment. Which my soul wants us to remember that I've been repeating this for like 6 months as well. Like discernment is a feeling. And again, if you have a really poor relationship to your emotions, you're gonna have a really hard time with your discernment. And so, anytime your world is showing you an emotion, like if you have a lot of fear in you when you're seeing news, that's a normal reaction, but actually, you don't have to experience that. I don't experience fear most of the time when I'm looking at the news. I also don't like put it in my face because to me, it's not really helpful to know all the details of all the horrors of the world. I prefer to fill my mind with other things that are about what I want to experience and what I'm creating for the collective from my personal point of view. But, honoring that fear and being able to sit with that fear when that comes up, I guarantee is how you start to reclaim some of your power there. And it's how it's how you're able to be present. It's a core component of that. Most people can't be present, fully present, and in that CEO role of their world because they're either rejecting or denying parts of themselves, which usually have an emotional component. They're emotions we don't want to feel or we haven't trained our nervous system to be able to tolerate that kind of intensity. So there's that aspect as well. But discernment is a feeling, and anytime you are given strong emotions by other, like, oh, this person is giving me a feeling of anger. This person's giving me a feeling of helplessness or hopelessness, or maybe it's all of it at the same time. Those are your keys. That's the holographic principles for you right there. And if you sit with those things long enough and you have the proper tools to integrate those parts of you, which is my work, my specialty, my expertise, then they just kind of cease to be, you can be more neutral and you can be more present even when you're witnessing really intense things in the world. And it is a skill to build, and it is probably one of the number one skills you will need in the next 5 years going forward if you want to thrive in all the stuff that's going to go down. Okay, so I wanted to start out really talking about viruses as mind control and entities. I've been going through this whole deconstruction of self-worth this week. So that's kind of the inspiration for this. And just so you know, I'm like still on this path with you guys. I'm not, I don't pretend that all the time I'm in my present CEO energy and that I'm not falling into spaces where I'm still rejecting parts of myself. But as I continue to walk the path and work the process that I use, more and more, it's a place that I'm able to be in a lot more often. And it just feels so good to be in this space of feeling in my power, even though a lot of the what's going on in the world can really spark that victimhood, that helplessness energy. Like I am helpless to do anything here. And I want to tell you that's valid and you need to own that part of you. And that is not your truth. If you sit with it long enough, you will remember that your truth is so much more than that hopelessness. But really, I want to think about how far I want to go into this because I've had so many downloads and insights over the last year about viruses and self-worth. But no, this has been going on for years and years and years, ever since I got trained in theta healing, because that is a theta healing teaching that viruses in particular and self-worth issues are linked. So, I mean, COVID, anybody? I mean, that was a new virus, but yeah, like how much do I want to go into that? I mean, what my soul, again, take this with a grain of salt. I've never spoken publicly about my views on COVID because it's a charged topic, but the time is now to be saying these things. Yeah, I feel like the COVID virus, I don't even remember the name of the virus. That's not the name of the virus. But anyways, that was the disease. The virus was I think maybe it was COVID-19. Whatever. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Um, that was a genetically or like man-made virus. I think most people are somewhat accepting of that, there's a lot of evidence that points to the lab. This is beyond evidence. This is just what my soul is telling me. It was absolutely kind of like genetically modified and engineered to specifically target people's self-worth about their body, their appearance, their breath of life and abundance issues. So, I mean, dang, we're in, at the time of recording this episode, April 20th, 2026, where like there's a lot of financial uncertainty. So these things take time to develop, right? And basically what I'm saying, what my soul is saying, like wants me to say it very directly, is that once these viruses get kind of in your tissues, right? And everybody has been exposed to the virus at this point in one way or another, whether that's, yes, shedding from a vaccine, so close proximity to someone that has like taken a recent vaccine, or just through being in the general public with other people, whether you've actually had the illness or not. And I've actually not really had COVID. There was like one suspected time that maybe I did have it, but I never got tested and I didn't have any long-term effects from that. But I do still have that virus in my body. And it's not a scary thing, actually. So there's a lot of, if you're in like the really holistic health world, I got to call that out. There's a lot of scary stuff about the spike protein and all this long-term damage and blah, blah, blah. That only that is a risk for sure, and it is a concern, but it's going to hit people with the largest self-worth issues the hardest. And that's how all viruses work. And I was even like, as I was just going through this layer this week of self-worth issues, I'm like, dude, I've been working on this shit for a long time. And so I was like, are you for real? Like another layer of self-worth issues. But that's how it works. You work through things as you're ready, right? To tolerate them. And that's by design. So, anyways, the process just can't be rushed, even though I get very impatient sometimes. But I was even processing viral stuff from like the bubonic plague, which I don't even know if that was a viral, there was a viral component to it. I don't know if they would, like the history books would talk about it in that way. And there have been very intelligent species of life, extraterrestrials. Yes, I'm not talking about this publicly as well, but I definitely believe in extraterrestrials. That is not where any of my information comes from. My information comes from my soul. Although my soul's like, yeah, but you've had lives as an extraterrestrial, as I think most of us have. So some of the wisdom I draw on is from like lifetimes that are not Earth-based. So take that or leave that. But anyways, my soul is saying there have been viruses that have been introduced at very crucial points in time throughout human history, and they have been aimed at controlling the minds of humanity. And originally it wasn't necessarily a malicious idea. It was just that it was almost like the species that were present on Earth that were more intelligent at that time didn't trust humanity with their own power. They didn't trust them to make the right decisions because they didn't think their brain, like the brain-heart connection, wasn't evolved enough to be able to, yeah, make 100% sovereign decisions. That they really believed, and they had enough evidence to believe that in their mind that if given their own true free will, humans would decide to kill each other. Humans would decide, especially back in like old times when it was very much that survival based mentality, very lack based, very zero sum competitive, like, very, very intense survival energies. They thought that it would just create chaos. And so yeah, I'm like, so I'm asking a question. I'm like, but how would they be able to do that without infringing upon our free will choice? Oh, that's why, because we're still subscribing, whether we were consciously aware or unconsciously aware, to ideas of low self-worth, which is actually what causes the humans to make bad decisions, decisions that hurt each other, decisions that cause chaos, decisions that cause violence, decisions that cause, yeah, survival based events in the world, we'll say. So take that or leave that. I've never channeled that information before. But anyways, that was kind of like the purpose behind it, and we opt into it through subscribing in our mind and agreeing to the concept that I have low self-worth, which at that time, especially, so there's a huge religious component. I'm not going to go super into that, but if you are watching this on YouTube and you are interested in the religious aspects of this, or you're listening on Spotify or Apple, you can just like shoot me a DM on Instagram. And let me know if you want to hear more about the religious aspects, but we're not going to get into that today. But basically, I'll just say one thing about that is that humans were also miseducated about the idea of God a lot. And the idea of God and how to interact with God and how to please God and how to, make sure that God doesn't hurt us and all this stuff. And, humans for a long time have been in a very victim relationship with the idea of God. It is becoming a more empowered relationship for some people now, although that's not necessarily true for all people. There's still a lot of people that fall victim to the rules and the dogma of like official religions, we'll say, that are not necessarily aligned with truth. So that's where that amazing discernment thing comes into play. But the one thing I wanted to say is that because of that victim like relationship with God. And that was experienced like, wow, if I upset God, then God's going to send a storm to ruin my crops. That kind of really old ideas and energy that is in pretty much all of our DNAs, no matter what kind of God your culture, you know, thousands of years ago was subscribing to. A lot of cultures had that kind of idea, that God was wrathful, you needed to please him. If you didn't follow the rules, then you would have a price to pay, right? And I'm just going to tell you that that is one of the fucking worst lies that humanity has ever been sold, and it is to control behavior. So it's kind of the same idea as viruses. Um, but because humans have experienced God that way, and it's like, well, I believe that though, because I didn't obey the rules, and then I had this horrible thing happen to me. And so they get in a self-blame energy, like I should have been a better person. They start judging themselves. I'm a bad person, and I have low self-worth, right? Only God is worthy. I have no worth unless I'm following the rules. And even then, I have to be perfect at it. I can't even tell you guys. Side note, like this has been some of the shit that I've had to unwind in my own body, mind, and soul for a while. Um, it's just this old religious stuff. And I didn't even grow up religious, but like literally we're talking about like, yeah, all of the history, all through the whole DNA. And so viruses have really shaped the human DNA. When we talk about what gene gets expressed, what gene gets turned on, modern science, again, this is what my soul is telling me, doesn't understand that process really. They are, a lot of the even malfunctions with the DNA and the genetics have to do with viruses that are being passed down from generation to generation through conception, mentally and physically, like on the spiritual level. So they're like the mind viruses that get implanted at the time of conception. And those are in the form of expectations of the parents. That's something that I've channeled for a while and I've never talked about on a podcast. So your parents' expectations for you as a child when you were born, even something as like, I'm gonna just leave this here. They expected you to be a boy and you were a girl has immense impact on you and your mind and your emotional world before you even form, because those expectations are imprinted onto the zygote, I think is what it's called, like the cell that is formed at the time of conception. But then you are in your mother's womb, and there are all the viruses and bacteria and everything that she's been exposed to, and so that's how it really gets passed down, really through well, the effects, the self-worth affects the quality of the male's sperm because self-worth is really a male frequency. But however, women carry the viruses as well through sexual partners or, yeah, just being exposed to viruses and having low self-worth themselves, which women have also systematically been programmed to believe that they are unworthy. And that also has a religious tie. I wasn't going to go into all this, but here's some, it's like just coming out. Like that's the other like huge religious tie. If you are a woman, like please do yourself self-worth work because especially if you have any sort of Christian Catholic roots in your DNA, yeah, they basically told you that women are the scourge of the earth, and they are to blame for all of the world's problems, going back to the Garden of Eden. So, hugely damaging story, one of the worst stories I think that has ever been told to humans, is original sin, especially for women. So, we will be doing an episode about that at another time, but this is about self-worth. And so I think I've just given you a good flavor of like this, how this actually. So the viruses can actually alter brain functioning. And this is not also this like there's a lot of stuff in science that has a lot of different cancers and just all kinds of different diseases and disorders are viral based and have a viral component, whether science knows that or not. And even holistic medicine is much better at this. We know like Epstein-Barr virus. We know that some of these like latent viruses that conventional medicine doesn't recognize as potentially causing a problem if they're not symptomatic. But even then, like they just dismiss connection on a deeper level. But there are all these like viral things, or like Lyme disease has a huge viral component, and that's like spiking. Yeah, lots of virus stuff, but they all feed off of low self-worth. And they can almost program it almost the way my soul is describing it to me right now is that the viruses have the ability to program the neural pathways, especially if you're a very passive person about your thoughts and your emotions, that they can actually kind of create the dominant pathways in the mind, if you will, that can then cause the cascading results, if you will, downstream effects of being having low self-worth, which is all kinds of things, right? It could be just like I'm always doubting myself. I'm always my own worst inner critic. It could be like I'm always just I social anxiety is one thing my soul's telling me right now. Like I have confidence being on in public or being my authentic self. I have a really hard time being confident in that. I'm always overthinking my conversations. I'm not confident in the way I communicate, like self-worth, self-worth, self-worth. So now we get to another kind of spiritual component, which is the idea of entities and spiritual, like psychic attacks. Yes, these things are real. There are entities that seek to control your mind, seek to control your energy. They have their own agendas. A lot of these entities, if you will, are lost souls is one thing. That they just experience too much confusion in their life. Low self-worth leads to a lot of confusion, indecision, not knowing who you are. And so therefore, when they die, they don't know where they belong. That's kind of like the idea behind purgatory. So there's a lot of ties to religion, and I'm not saying that like some of the things that religion talks about, various religions, is absolutely true, but a lot of it's mixed in with some mistruth, and that's where it gets confusing for humans. And when humans are confused, they also default to low self-worth. They think it's something about them. They're blaming themselves. That's also low self-worth. And those pathways can just be really reinforced by viruses. So, yes, there are entities that can, I don't even want to call it an attack. They are just literally resonating with your frequency. The viruses help to open you up to that frequency. They live on a very low frequency because they themselves don't have life force, a lot of life force with them. They're separated it from it. Most of the entities in theta healing, we call them wayward spirits. They spark fear in you. If you're into spirituality, you've maybe heard the term loosh, where different things can attach to you and they are actually sparking stress and fear within you to give them like a boost of charge. Because stress, as I've been talking about on previous episodes, is just a boost of energy, right? And how we experience that doesn't actually have to be through a survival paradigm, although that is usually how we access our energetic reserve is through survival paradigm. And so there's many kinds of entities. Again, there's the lost souls. They don't really know what they're doing, but they do need to feed off of other people's energy in order to kind of, I don't want to say stay alive, but I don't know how to articulate that yet. But it's like so they can actually still exist because they're separated from their own life force out front through confusion when they were alive. The other thing too is souls that have karma, right? That they can't leave the earthly plane. They don't want to reincarnate because they hated their life. And the only way they can resolve their karma is to come back to earth and have a different experience with the same kind of energies. They don't want to do that. But they are also fragmented in that way where they can't leave So they feel trapped. It's a very victimhood state. So anytime you're in a victimhood state, though, you're in a lower energy frequency altogether. And so these kinds of entities, or those are more like, again, fragmented soul, fragments of souls that don't have enough energy to be incarnated in a physical body. They really need to leave, but they don't. The only way to leave is to come back through a body, and they don't want to do that. And so instead, they are feeding off of your life force energy. And low self-worth is what opens you up to all of this. And then there's another kind of, and we're just kind of going over these like broad spectrums. There's another kind of entity that those are entities that have consciously chosen through their soul path, through a variety of experiences, to completely separate from the light, separate from life force, and operate in the dark, and to manipulate other people as their light, right? They're essentially running on borrowed energy. All of these entities are. And so, yeah, I don't want to go too much more into that because it's not something to be afraid of, honestly. I've experienced many attachments over my life. And it's not a fucking big deal at all unless you're afraid of your own emotions and your own stories, because all they can do is amplify things that are already within you. So that's what my soul has wanted me to say for a long time, but it just hasn't been time for me to talk about the entities yet. Like they can't. So when people like, I'm being attacked by an entity or someone else's energy, I'm being psychically attacked, I'm like, they can only attack you where you have vulnerabilities. They can only intensify that which is already within you. And so it can feel very terrifying if it's something you haven't wanted to go into and you're not ready to. So this is where it can be like just really hard because they're forcing you, maybe not at the timing that you would particularly choose to go into certain topics and ideas and emotions that you're not ready to go into yet. It's going to put them in your face. And that's the reason why they are allowed to do what they are doing. Because it's really a tool for evolution and a tool for growth and a tool to actually help you reclaim your wholeness. That's the only reason why they're able to do what they're doing without violating the laws of the universe, because you have free will choice. So you are freely choosing on some level. This is not about blame. Again, blame is that self-worth, is that victim state. But you are choosing on some level to engage in that kind of like believing that's part of your identity. And that's why the viruses can even be there. And that's why entities can attach to you as well. So just know that there's really nothing to be afraid as long as you know that what they are doing is they are just essentially kind of like using their energy as pressure points to push on your deepest, darkest stuff that you don't want to deal with. And it gives them a spark of energy through the survival-based paradigm to feed off of. It's like a win-win scenario to them, right? Um, so here what we're talking about is sovereignty and wholeness. So how do you, especially guys, if you have been looking at any of the stuff online about the wars, about Gaza and like the starvation stuff that was happening last year, any of this like really hard, heavy stuff, Epstein files, just know that there are lots of entities that are loving that kind of thing. And so if you are in a position, even if you're like that today, I'm usually feeling really worthy, I'm feeling really confident in myself. But today I'm just like in my head, I'm doubting. Stay the fuck off social media. My soul has told me that. Like, I think the last two episodes I've mentioned that, and I think I'm gonna probably just keep mentioning it going forward. Like, know yourself and don't put yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, well now I have to deal with all this shit. That's because now this is all came up and I didn't need to deal with that today. Well, stay the fuck off social media and stay the fuck off the news. If you're feeling confused, if you're in doubt, if you're already stressed, which is hard because a lot of people have trained themselves, which is actually still part of the mind virus. I'm like, what kind of virus is that? Oh, herpes virus. It's another one that most people have as well, where they pick up their phone to scroll as a form of relaxation, but it's not relaxation. You're literally leaving your body. When you leave your body, you're really open to things to be attached, but you won't feel it immediately because you're not connected with your body. You're dissociated. Same with alcohol. Anything you use to leave your body, to numb the pain, to just escape, to check out, anything you use, right? There's so many things, and there's nothing wrong with this, but just know when you come back into the body space, you're going to feel what they were poking. So it's nothing to be afraid of if you know how to deal with it. So, but this is how also the path to sovereignty and wholeness is by, where I want to leave you today through this very fascinating episode of mind viruses and entities and self-worth. You don't have to heal everything. That's actually the amazing thing is people will be like, "Oh, damn, I gotta go heal all of my self-worth issues before I can be immune to the chaos of the world." Because most of the chaos that's being caused is honestly what we're talking about. It's like these entities that are feeding off of you and they're just creating chaos. And there's also a universal aspect where there's just higher frequencies coming in general. Yeah, we're not going to get into that. But anyways, you don't have to heal all of your wounds perfectly in order to be in a state of wholeness, to be in a state of sovereignty, and to have self-worth. You just have to be able to be willing to own all those parts of you, right? You have to be willing to own the part of you that has low self-worth. It has to be integrated into the whole. So that must mean that you can't be operating in rejection of, in avoidance of, in fear of the worthlessness feeling, the shame. So shame and self-worth are also very linked. So anytime you're feeling shame, things you're ashamed of that in your past, like those are like the big ones that I would go fucking deal with. Like if there could be like bang for your buck, like what do I spend my time uh like owning when loving within myself or anything that causes you guilt and shame. And like then you'll at least have a lot stronger of an aura. That's what we're talking about, is having a strong, bright, radiant aura. And I do feel called to tell you, like, I I will do an episode all about the immune system that came up in I think the energy reading for the year. I've been getting messages about the immune system, the human immune system has to change, all this stuff, and I think this is a component of it, obviously, because viruses affect the immune system. Even my pneumonia, the stuff that I had last year, if you've been around for a while, there ties into this. Anyways, so much I could say about this, but we're talking about having a strong aura, a radiant aura, which is a healthy immune system. There's a lot more to it, but all you have to do is own all those pieces of you. And the way you own that is through the emotions. You can't own a part of you if you're in fear of the emotional feeling. So anything that makes you feel shame, like, wow, that's a gift actually. And it probably is the mind virus creating something for you to feel shame. But as long as you don't turn away, then you're sealing that hole in your aura. Those entities can no longer attach to that. Even if it's not fully healed, you're acknowledging it, you're accepting it, you're validating it. You're saying, this is okay. It's okay that this happened to me. It's okay that I acted that way. I maybe I do have some regrets. You do have to let go of the regrets. There is something about regrets, resentments, revenge type energies and rejection. And that's also a theta healing concept. They call it the 4 R's. Those four also are very big in terms of creating weak auras. So my main message is there you don't have to heal everything. There are like big things that you need to heal in order to have a stronger, healthier aura, but it's not going back and resolving every little issue. It's more about being able to relate to the messiness of your life with love. And you usually do that through the big themes of your life, which are probably those big karmic lessons. And you don't have to, like, you can still live your life. I just feel like I have to say this for probably me and other people. Once you clear your negative karma, these big cycles in your life, the big fragmentation, that's the same thing. Big fragments in your soul that fracture your aura and leave it like holes, gaping holes. And those are really traumatic experiences. And these repeating patterns that you just, no matter what you do, they won't seem to go away. Um, Hold on, I just lost my train of thought. Probably because this is actually very important. And let's see. Anyways, the fragments. Oh yeah, that's what it was. When you are when you clear that those big karmas and you seal up your aura and you're no longer available for manipulation or siphoning of energy. I like your life doesn't end there. I don't know. I feel like I have to say that for somebody. I feel like there's this also misconception as like once you've learned all your lessons and you've cleared your negative karma, then you die. And that's the end of your life. No. If you're born right now and you're listening to this, that's not the case. You're here to resolve the karma so then you can live as a free person. We're transitioning to that era. You might be one of the first humans in your bloodline for sure, or on the planet to experience that kind of wholeness and living from that. And this is how we walk through the era that we're entering into. And that quite honestly, like for me, feels energetically, again, next 5 years, I think are gonna be pretty intense. I think there's gonna be a lot of shit going down. And I'll bring it home to the original message. You have the ability to create your own experience inside of the collective experience. And the way you do that is through owning your wholeness. Stop avoiding your emotions. The emotions are the key. And also, there is a thought component as well, but usually it's the emotions that we have been avoiding and that are stopping us from being whole. And you don't even have to process all your unprocessed emotions to be whole either. You just have to own that, okay, that there's probably parts of me that are still holding on to stuff, right? It's just really about owning the totality of who you are. And then you get to go through things at your own pacing. You're not gonna have an outside entity or a collective entity dictating, hey, guess what? It's time to go dig up that shit right now. I know you just felt like you got a little like came up for a breath of air, but now you go back down. Like if you've ever felt that feeling where I just got to a point where I felt like I could breathe and touch that freedom, and then damn, I got pulled back down. This is that mechanism at play. So own your self-worth, which means own all the parts of you that you don't think are worthy, the world doesn't think are worthy. Just and learn how to love yourself within that. That's really it. And that's how we thrive through the coming weeks, months, and years. I hope this episode served you well. Soul fragmentation, resolving that kind of stuff, teaching you to find love inside your emotions, teaching your nerves, training your nervous system to be able to handle the intensity of emotions. These are some of my specialties inside of my one-on-one containers, which I will link in the show notes if you feel the call. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye.